G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here with a SunFoil project update regarding at Dave's Act in Canberra with his V6 four-wheel drive Ford Explorer in city traffic. 2 points. First point, good news. Dave's come up with a fuel burn figure for the first time in a month. He's now recording 7.37 kilometres to the litre. His last tank of fuel before he fitted his 20-watt Minimalist SunFoil, he recorded 6.01 kilometres to the litre. So he's 22% more fuel efficient than he was before he fitted a solar panel. Least anybody try and chalk that up to placebo effect and driving more carefully and defensive driving techniques. 6.01 kilometres to the litre, the final tank before he fitted his SunFoil. That compares to 5.3 kilometres to the litre, which was the first tank that he measured when he first started considering a SunFoil. The second tank, right, while he was still considering it, the last tank before he ordered the bits, 5.67 kilometres to the litre. So 5.3, 5.67, 6.01, that's 13.39% improvement due to placebo effect. If you want to compare it to somebody else measuring placebo effect, Michael at Precise Bible in his 7-point-something litre Chevrolet pickup, which he drives to work at 70 miles an hour, he was getting 26 miles to the gallon as his baseline. He acquired a Scan-Guage Tool which sits on his dashboard. By paying attention to the Scan-Guage Tool, computerised biofeedback so he could see what his inlet manifold pressure was and his fuel flow and his exhaust gas temperature and his torque output, he got 30 miles to the gallon. Still driving at 70 miles an hour, but getting there more gently and rolling into corners and, you know, downshifting, not hitting the brakes. Yeah, 15% improvement with a computer feedback device to help him versus Dave's 13.39% improvement just trying to drive defensively. But after the defensive driving tricks petered out, he's then improved another 22% on top of that. So, very difficult to argue against that. Dave's Act is doing really good things with his SunFoil, and his battery is not finished improving. It's going to keep getting better for another month. It's my guess. The other thing Dave's Act has gleefully told me is that he Googled the term smart charge alternator. And, you know, last week I was pretty upset when my son told me that he went to a Bosch in-service course for auto electricians in Brisbane, and the instructor told him that there's no possible way a smart charge alternator is compatible with a SunFoil because the computer that runs the alternator won't know that the SunFoil's been charging the battery while the car was sitting in the car park. What Dave's Act found is that smart charge alternators are only designed for use with silver calcium batteries. Because if you put a lead acid battery in the same car and the smart charge alternator tries to run it up to 16 volts, bingo, dead battery. And 98% of the cars on the road in the global fleet at the moment have lead acid batteries. So as at Desert File said when he threw me out of his HHO challenge for not having enough bullshit in my story, if you've got a lead acid battery and you fit a solar panel, you will save some fuel. I suspect that Desert File was having trouble grasping the magnitude of the savings, but that's because he hasn't paid attention to the fact that the rolling resistance of the tyres on the road and every bearing in the drivetrain all the way up to the clutch is 1/3 of a horsepower, and you can prove this because you can push your car on flat concrete with its tyres pumped up. You can push the bloody thing at walking speed. And a fit human produces 1/3 of a horsepower, you know, like Olympic cyclist type fit human can maintain 1/3 of a horsepower. Aerodynamically at 50 kilometres an hour, 5 horsepower. As speed doubles, drag squares, so on the highway at 100 kilometres an hour, 5 times 5 is 25 horsepower. Now the fact that the engine may be capable of producing 250 horsepower means nothing because the speed limit says you can't use any more than 25 of them. If the alternator is capable of sucking 25 or 30 horsepower out of the belt at full electric output, That can be a very large fraction of the 25 horsepower that you're using on the highway. It can be 50% of your fuel burn on the highway if the alternator is at full output. If the battery is 30% flat and the alternator's at 30% output, in my car, that's 3 horsepower. Driving around town, I'm only using 5 horsepower. For aerodynamics, 1/3 of a horsepower for rolling resistance. By applying a small amount of solar power to fill the battery up whenever the battery will take the power and whenever the sun's in the sky, you can cut out a huge amount of the fuel which your car actually uses in practice, because that fuel was not being used to propel the vehicle. It was being used to kiss and make up to the battery for the short engine run times, the failure to finish recharging it, and the time spent sulfating in the car park while operating the static systems, like the burglar alarm, the central locking, the dashboard clock, the stereo memory chip. All of these things, the engine management computer, they all suck on the battery while the car's parked in the parking lot. If you've got a SunFoil on the roof, the car's got a full battery when you go to start it up, and you drive off into the sunset with only your electrical demand of the moment having to be produced by either the SunFoil or the alternator. So here we have the graph of Dave's ACT figures. 7.37 kilometres to the litre versus 6.01, which was the best he achieved before he fitted the SunFoil, compared to the 5.3, which is what he was getting when he was just driving like a Leadfoot boy racer around Canberra. He's not making or selling or distributing anything for SunFoils. He's sharing his information with me because I shared my information with him. I accept that he's not telling me bullshit because he has no motives for telling me bullshit. He's not going to profit by telling me bullshit. Same thing goes with Michael at Precise Bible. He's not selling SunFoils. He's thinking about trying to set up a business fitting them, but at the moment, no. He's just sharing his information with the world because he thought he invented it. He didn't know I existed. At Desert File in America, in the New Mexico desert, he's not selling bits for SunFoils. You know, his hobbies are lampooning ridiculous government decisions and bureaucratic findings, poking fun at fundamentalist Christians because he's an atheist and he just enjoys that, and making life miserable for people who are selling alleged fuel improvement or fuel efficiency improvement devices which don't in fact work. When I tried to enter his competition, I knew I had my tongue in my cheek because I know that SunFoils save fuel for all the reasons the hydrogen bubblers waste fuel. 1 amp from your alternator is 1% worse fuel burn. Modern cars have 120 or 150 amp alternators. If the battery was full and you were driving up the road only running the engine management computer and the spark plugs and the fuel pump, you might be going to get 10 kilometres to the litre, you know, 10 litres per 100 k's. But if you turn on everything in the car, and if the battery's at 1/3 flat, crank your 120 amp alternator up to full output, you can see 22 litres per hour fuel burn. You can make 10 litres an hour 120% worse. You can't make it 120% better, but you can make it 120% worse or 150% worse. My SunFoil makes my fuel burn 33.25% better. I now travel 10.66 kilometres per litre per month. I used to travel 8. And I'm not doing any of this placebo stuff. I'm driving like a boy racer because I want to overtake people and show them the sign on the back of my car that says piston hybrid solar. Right? I want them to think about it. So I'm doing the Leadfoot thing, you know, seeing how fast I can get up to 100 k's, and if somebody in front of me is doing 95 k's, I will overtake them. And you think about it, if you've got a 5-year-old car with a lead acid battery and you're worried about the fuel burn, what makes more sense? Go into debt and borrow money and buy a new one, or fit a SunFoil? Ciao. And it's not rocket science, because I stopped at solar thermal ramjets to make the ram scoop powered boundary layer airflow control more efficient.